Welcome to Surrender School. This is the 2023 Step Study.
God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my emotional sobriety, the 12 steps, and you for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my emotional sobriety, the 12 steps, and especially you. All right. We are going to go over steps 10 and 11, according to Lori and his study guide. I thought this was really interesting reading, you guys. So I'm just going to dive in. So the first thing I want to highlight is on page 54, very first few paragraphs there. He says, we ended our discussion of step 9 with the hidden promises on pages 84 and 85. The big book ends those promises with a very clear warning. This is how we react, which is neutrality, food neutrality, so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. If we do not keep in fit spiritual condition, we will relapse. That's about as clear as you can get. Our mental obsession will return. We will become insane again. How do we keep in fit spiritual condition? You might recall Dr. Bob's summary of the 12 steps. Clean house, trust God, help others. We will find that once we have recovered, that summary means step 10, clean house, step 11, trust God, and step 12, help others. You know, to me, this is the lens that I use, like the lens through which I see everything. Step 10, 11, and 12. They're kind of my foundational structure for the house of my life that I build on it. And so it's very important to me that I practice these every day, multiple times a day. Okay, then continuing on, step 10 on the left side of page 54. Lori says that for my first 6 years in program, I went through a cycle of recovery and relapse, recovery and relapse. I think most of us can identify with that, unfortunately. This happened until I was finally introduced to the big book's approach to recovery. As I began to recover using the big book approach, I analyzed what had gone wrong in my first 6 years. I discovered 2 things that were the main cause of my relapses. 2 things. The first was that I had refused to accept that there were certain foods and eating behaviors that caused me uncontrollable cravings. The notion of the allergy of the body that I discussed at length in our discussion of step 1. I had fallen prey to the notion that all the diets I had ever been on and all the experts I read told me, which was that after I lost my weight, I could eat anything in moderation. That's like one of the biggest lies of the diet industry. So I took back foods that I had eliminated during my weight loss time, tried to eat them in moderation, and soon found that I was gorging on them. The second thing was far more serious. There had been a number of times when I was trying to stay away from my trigger foods, but I still found rationalizations to return to them. My daughter only gets married once. I have to have a piece of the wedding cake, right? Okay. The mental obsession that I discussed at length in step 1. Why was this mental obsession returning? Why were my best efforts not to eat these foods being undermined by my complete lack of will? Okay, that's, to me, that pattern of recovery, relapse, and the fact that he boils it down to, essentially, what he's boiling it down to is we don't accept our physical allergy, the fact that we have alcoholic foods, and we don't do what we need to do to take care of ourselves and set ourselves up for success around the mental obsession. 2 things. He goes on to say, I discovered the reason by looking back on how I felt right after I had completed step 9 each time I went through the steps after my relapses. Right after step 9, I felt absolutely great. Food wasn't a problem for me. The hidden promises were true. I was placed in a position of complete neutrality. Yet that feeling of neutrality, of power over food, dissipated quickly, and I went back to it after a few months. Didn't take me a few months. Never took me a few months. Usually it took me a few weeks, and then after that, as my disease progressed, it only took me a few days. Why was this? I was meditating, had 5 meditation books and said my prayers. I was sponsoring and giving service galore. So steps 11 and 12 were covered. But how was I doing step 10? Well, I was reading it on the wall, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So as life went on and I yelled at my kids or began to feel bad about something, I admitted it. I apologized. That's all I did. That's all I thought I should do. I'm going to read that again. That's all I did. I just admitted it and apologized. That's all I thought I should do. But as I began to study the Big Book's approach and learned with the help of great teaching tapes to look beyond the steps on the wall and read the Big Book's actual instructions, I realized the mistake I had made. Here are the Big Book's instructions for step 10. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. If you look at these instructions, you will see pretty clearly that they are really the equivalent of doing steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay? So he saw that it was clearly about more than just admitting a mistake and knee-jerkingly apologize for it, as if that was enough. Okay. Now, on page 55, left-hand side, 3rd full paragraph down, I have a simple 12-point checklist. I freaking love this thing. I have a simple 12-point checklist. It just happened to be 12 for when I do a step 10. I look at the doctor's opinion and find the words, they are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. I look at page 52 in We Agnostics and find the bedevilments. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. I also look at my food issues. So my 12-step checklist for when I do a step 10 is, I thought this was great. What a great list of questions to ask yourself when you have that feeling of discomfort. Because most of the time, when I get, for me, the cue for having to do a step 10 is any feeling of discomfort, any niggling little feeling of discomfort. I know I need to do a step 10. And I don't always know well, most of the time, I don't know what's going on. If it's a big blow up or something like that, where it's really obvious, I get it. But a lot of times this stuff is very subtle for me and it sneaks up and it bites me in the butt. So I thought his clarifying questions here are awesome. 1, am I restless? 2, am I irritable? 3, am I discontented? 4, am I having trouble with personal relationships? 5, can I not control my emotional nature? 6, am I prey to misery and depression? 7, can I not make a living? 8, do I have a feeling of uselessness? 9, am I full of fear? 10, am I unhappy? 11, am I not of real help to other people? And 12, is my food or quantity of food getting sloppy? Okay, because I feel like these questions get to the very heart of the matter for us. He goes on to say, if the answer to any one or more of these questions is yes, then it's time for me to clean house again. So I take out my step 4 forms and I fill them out. I do a step 5 and then a 6 and 7, and I figure out and then do my amends. What I usually find is that my amends turn out to be living amends for the most part. I usually find that something has been going on in my life that is bugging me, and I haven't really noticed it or given it much thought. And I get clean again. And the answers to all the above 12 questions is a resounding no. And I get the promises again. So he takes himself through steps 4 through 9 again. He walks himself through the entire set of steps. Okay. Then he talks on page 56. And I know I'm reading a lot, but this stuff is so good. Okay, page 56, left side, refining step 10. He says, one thing I've been doing lately with really powerful results, I thought this was really clever, is to use the step 4 resentment form a little differently for some very significant issues. And to me, the significant stuff is the stuff that just keeps popping up, keeps popping up, keeps popping up, keeps popping up over and over and over and over again, right? And that working a step 10 on it doesn't seem to be, a lighter step 10 doesn't seem to be deep enough. So he says, so for some very significant issues in my life, instead of writing those issues down in column 1 and writing down why those issues are in my mind in column 2, I've been taking what I would normally put down in column 2 and putting each one of those points as a separate point in column 1. So he is taking a very deep dive into his discomfort. So for example, I was trying to make a decision as to whether or not to change my career. In a step 4, I would write down my career in column 1, and then some points in column 2, like I'm bored, I want to feel more useful, I'm worried about making money. What I've been doing lately in step 10 is putting down as separate resentments each of the ideas I would normally put down as reasons in column 2 for the resentment. So for example, instead of putting down my career in column 1, instead I'll put down I'm bored and I want to be more useful and I'm worried about making money into column 1. Then when I get around to column 2, I ask myself why these resentments are on my mind. This has given me much deeper insight into the issues because I'm going deeper and deeper into my motivations and attitudes to life. And I'm going to read that again because that's so important here. This has given me much deeper insight into the issues because I'm going deeper and deeper into my motivations and my attitudes. Motivations and my attitudes Those are huge for me in the mental obsession, part of my disease, my motivations and my attitudes. Okay. I would recommend this for step 4. Step 4 is to deal with the big stuff, but I sure do recommend it for major issues that you have to deal with in step 10, the stuff that keeps showing up. It clears your thinking. It's because of this approach to step 10 that I haven't had a relapse for over 13 years. When I look at the journeys of people I have sponsored, it is precisely those who have not done step 10 on a regular basis who have relapsed. Unfortunately, following the path I walked for my first 6 years in program. This is a really excellent way of getting down to the deeper stuff that drives our disease. I don't know about you, I'm good in a crisis. It's the daily annoying crap that gets me, that takes me down, that leads me back to the food. It's that stuff that doesn't. Okay, so that is step 10, and I love his way of doing it, and I am going to try some experiments and do this for myself, because I really think taking it a couple of steps deeper in listing the reasons why we have this resentment as the resentments, and then taking a deeper dive into them. I think that's going to prove very fruitful for me. All right, we're going to move on to step 11. He says on page 57, left-hand side, second paragraph down, the Big Book's warning about needing to keep in fit spiritual condition begins its discussion of step 11 on page 84 of the Big Book. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the visions of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. It's not the prayer. I have to remind myself, the prayer is not, how can I get what I want? How can I talk you into giving me what I want? These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. And he says here, he clarifies a reprieve is actually a suspension of a death sentence. And it couldn't be more literal for us. The Big Book then talks about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from our higher power. I find this really interesting because I haven't seen this talked about quite in this way in meetings. The whole concept is to develop a vital sixth sense that gives us a direct connection to the power which is greater than we are. We are trying to learn to act intuitively, directly from our hearts, with the purest of motives, motivations, and attitudes. We have lived at the very least a double life. In my case, at times, it was a triple or quadruple life. Now we have to live according to the dictates of our higher power. This is why we practice step 11 as a way of life, always being plugged in to our higher power so we can live our lives without having to medicate with food. That plugging in is vital, or at least it is for me. Then he goes on and he talks about specific directions that are in the Big Book for step 11. Page 57 on the left-hand side, last paragraph. These suggestions are, in effect, the minimum we should be doing. I know many people who spend an hour or two meditation in the morning using any number of powerful meditation techniques. They are very spiritual people, and I respect them tremendously. But at the minimum, they also do what the Big Book suggests. The Big Book has 3 kinds of prayers and meditations. The first is what we do on going to sleep, as discussed in the first full paragraph of page 86. The second is what we do on awakening, as discussed in the last 2 paragraphs on page 86 and the first 3 paragraphs on page 87. And the third is what we do during the daytime, all day long. We pray that prayer all day long. And that's on discussed in the last paragraph on page 87, going on to page 88. So he breaks it down. I mean, and the big book goes through this. Our practice doesn't start in the morning. Our practice starts the night before. We set ourselves up for success the night before. Okay. And then we do the morning, and then we practice all day long. Okay. So the practice starts the night before. So he goes into it. And he says, he starts with the evening practice, page 57, middle of the right-hand column. He says, the evening prayer and meditation is really a step 4 through 9 inventory, isn't it? Here's the annotated version. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Step 4. Do we owe an apology? Steps 8 and 9. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Step 5. Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time, or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Step 6 and step 7. Okay, now I will tell you, I have had so much trouble with my nighttime routine. My morning routine is down. I love it. I have been doing it forever. And even my daytime routine that he'll talk about later on is much better for me. But the nighttime routine was always a problem because I either had to do it too early, or else if I waited too long, I would be falling asleep in the middle of it. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things I did was that I made it have to be bigger than it needed to be. Like my morning routine takes me, my morning routine takes me about 30 to 45 minutes. And I was trying to put something in play similarly long in the evening, and it just didn't work for me. And finally, out of sheer desperation, what I started to do, and what I still do to this day, is when I go to bed, I do, take my makeup off and get in my jammies and do that. And then I lay down in bed, I take a nice deep breath, and then I connect in with my higher power. And I ask about, how did I do today? How did I do today? What did I do well, and what could I do better? And what do you want me to do tomorrow? I review my day of what's going to happen the next day and see if I've forgotten anything or if I need to drop anything. And it takes me 5 minutes max. And I'm already laying down in bed. It didn't have to be a big production to be useful to me. And because the big production didn't work, I would manage to do it 1 or 2 nights, and then it would just all fall apart. So I figured doing something was better than doing nothing. And that simple practice has served me really, really well. Along with a compulsive overeater, I'm a compulsive complicator too. So I really had to let go of that. Okay, then he says on page 58, middle of the left-hand column, he says the emphasis on the evening prayer and meditation is to figure out what I could do better for the next day. It is not introspective. We review our past day to see how we did and how we can do better. We don't see that we were a crappy person that day, apologize to whoever we were crappy, and move on. That's not the point. We want to do better. We want to grow along spiritual lines, right? That's what this whole thing is about. Then he launches into the morning practice, page 58, left-hand column. We're given wonderful instructions for clearing our mind and thinking through things with the best of motives. There's that word again. The most wonderful and freeing thing is the instruction that we don't know what we should be doing, that if we don't know what we should be doing, if we face indecision, we pray for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision, and then we relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. It is truly remarkable what happens when we do it this way. At least that's been my experience and the experience of countless hundreds of people I have talked to over the years. Sometimes when I do my prayer and meditation in the morning, I don't get an answer. And sometimes, it just has to percolate. It just has to percolate and my higher power will work it out. And then I'll have an intuitive thought. It'll just pop into my head and it works really well. But if I demand an answer right now, or demand that this discomfort that I have go away right now, I'm just back in self-will and I don't learn anything. And I just try and force things. And this is such a gentle way of allowing my higher power's wisdom into my daily life. I'm not demanding anything. I make room for, I open up to, and that's a very different practice. Very different, at least for me. He says, in effect, at least from a psychological point of view, we're letting our subconscious take over. And if our subconscious is filled with good motives, then it will do a great job for us. And for those who are more religious, they find that they hear their God's directions very, very clearly. Love that. A lot of the questions, okay, just a second. I like the reminder that I don't have to bang my head against a brick wall. Just because I didn't get that intuitive thought right in that moment, or just because I'm still feeling some discomfort, doesn't mean I did something wrong, or I didn't do it right, or whatever. It's just the way the process works. I don't have to reject myself or bang my head against the wall, which I used to do a lot. Then he goes through the prayer and meditation that we use all through the day. And this, to me, this section is probably the most comforting because I feel like I'm not alone. I feel like I take my higher power with me everywhere I go all day long. So it's on page 58, top of the right-hand column. And the daytime prayers, there are times when I have to repeat, thy will not be done. Thy will not mine be done. Thy will not mine be done. Thy will not mine be done, over and over and over again until I calm down and get some sense of direction, but it works. And I say my prayers are things like, what am I not seeing here? Help me see this differently. What can I learn from this? Those are some of my prayers that I say to myself all day long. And it feels so comforting to me. Because for me, being alone in the mess is the worst. Feeling alone in the mess is a surefire way of getting back to the food, of going back to the food. So I need my higher power with me every day with that. Okay. So did you see the sheet of prayers on page 59 that he has? I thought that was brilliant, putting it all together on one page for us. This is something you could even use, put in a meditation book or something, or your journal, and pull it out and use it at specific times. But I thought it was great putting it together like that. Okay, I think that's all I got. So I guess we'll open it up for questions now.
Are we meant to be able to go through step 4 to step 9 on our own to do step 10, or do we need guidance from our sponsor?
I think a lot of people would say, according to the Big Book way, it is done with another person, your sponsor or not. They talk about the original step 10 instructions are, sharing at once with someone. And so that is the way the Big Book recommends it. And I think that's the way that Lori would do that. I'm an introvert, and I'm kind of shy. You wouldn't know that, but I'm kind of shy by nature, and I had to reconfigure step 10 so I could work it, because without fail, whenever I did a step 10 and I called and shared it with someone, I wound up eating. And so I had to figure out how to do it. And what I wound up doing was I do it with my higher power. If I do not find relief, then I will contact someone. I'll contact somebody in my God squad to help me out. A lot of people, like, there are all kinds of step 10 trains, and I know there's a WhatsApp step 10 group where you can get somebody to talk to immediately at any time of day. I know that is a great help to a lot of people. I really wanted it to work for me, and I was demanding that it work for me, and it didn't work for me. So I had to figure out how to make it work for me. And that's what I came up with. But I think most people share with another person.
Also, is there a quicker way to do step 10 for strong fear triggers in the moment? The person is worried that they relapse before they ever got through steps 4 to 10.
When you are first abstinent, it's important to have some strategies to get through, because you're not really promised freedom from your food obsession and freedom from your addiction until after step 9. I mean, that's the way the Big Book puts it through. And we're supposed to be abstinent as we're working the steps. And so how in the world it seems like a chicken and egg situation. And so Lori talks about having some strategies to help yourself through until you get through step 9. And so I think there are some things to do. I know I came up with some things to do. I did essentially whatever it took. And my only goal for that day would have been to be abstinent. So if I had gotten through the day abstinent, it would have been a success, even if I had spent it sucking my thumb underneath my bed that day. So I did whatever I needed to do in order to be abstinent. But what it really came down to, and this is sort of off topic, and I'm hesitating to talk about it, but self-care is vital in this program in order to not self-medicate. It's not like the steps give us willpower. It's not like, what the steps do is they give us a spiritual awakening, and they give us a complete psychic change, an entire psychic change, like Dr. Young talked about in the Doctor's Opinion. And so we have to do our lives differently. And part of that for me was figuring out how to take care of myself around hard things, difficult emotions, annoying people, a flat tire, when the internet went down, all of that stuff I have to figure out how to deal with, as well as, my sister is dying, or, my mother has been diagnosed with dementia, or whatever it is. I have to figure out how to live my life without using food to get through every day. And for me, that has been intense self-care. And the biggest share of that self-care is working the steps. And another portion of that is working on emotional sobriety. And probably the entire overarching way that I do self-care is developing a relationship with a concept of a higher power that works for me. And that this program is put together to do that. In the immediate moment when you're having like an intense a fear experience, I would do things like dive off into whatever spiritual literature sustained me, whether that's program literature or my own spiritual practice literature. Sometimes I would do a guided meditation in order to get through that. Sometimes I would call a friend. Sometimes I would go take a hot bath and cry in the bathtub. I mean, I had to have different strategies, and I had to kind of experiment to find out which ones worked for me. I don't know if this is helpful or not. But I feel like learning how to take care of ourselves, learning how to take care of myself was one of my biggest spiritual growth points, because I didn't know how to do it. The only way I knew how to take care of myself was to eat. That was the only method I had. It was the only strategy I had. And I was 50 some years old, and that's all I had. And so I really had to find some other ways to do it.
No problem. Thank you. There's two more questions. The next question is, what are examples of the kind of help we do for others in step 10, especially if we tend to give too much?
Compulsive
Right?
overeaters are all overgivers, right? In the actual instructions for step 10 in the big book, they say, turn your thoughts to someone you can help, not go help someone right immediately. It's turn your thoughts to how you can help. Okay, so that's a little different. And for those of us that are, people that give too much, people that overgive as a way of, for me, overgiving and taking care of other people was a huge crutch that I used to try and feel safe and get my needs met. And so I had to really get very clear about my motives for helping. Okay. And sometimes the best way to help is to not do anything at all, to let the person figure it out themselves or get the consequences for whatever it is they're doing. It's not helpful for you to say for the 99th time that that's not a good idea, because clearly they're going to do it. So I really had to get clear about my motivations. Why do I want to help this person? Am I really helping? Am I robbing them of the opportunity to learn this themselves? Am I robbing them of the opportunity to learn how to take care of themselves? So thinking about how I can help others is actually quite a deep question. It's not as simple as, okay, I'm going to help put the chairs out at a meeting. That is a wonderful form of service. But the deeper ways of figuring out whether I'm doing this for you to get my needs met, or I'm doing this for you as an act of service to be useful to you and my higher power. And it's that motivation packet that I had to get really clear about.
How do I hold faith, God, it's still there when it seems our request for guidance aren't being answered? Could you please speak on God's timing, please?
One of the things that I've had to give up in order to stay abstinent and in order to be in recovery is getting my way in everything, absolutely everything. Because as soon as I demand that I get answers, or that I get an answer I like, or that I get the right answer, or any of that kind of stuff, I'm back in self-will. I am trying to run the show. And so there are times, like I do two-way prayer practice every morning. So I am literally, absolutely concretely asking for guidance for that day. And I do that practice every single morning. Now, I may have a specific question in mind, and I start my two-way prayer by journaling a little bit about what's going on and what I need some guidance on. And then I set my journal down and I sit quietly and I listen. I try and listen to any kind of guidance that comes through. Sometimes I will have an intuitive thought or an inspiration around what it is I'm seeking guidance about. Sometimes something completely from left field will come in, pop into my mind, and it's like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to get that. And I will write that particular guidance down. Maybe I didn't get guidance for what was going on that day, but apparently what was more important in my higher powers way of looking at things was the guidance that I got. Sometimes what I think is important isn't necessarily important. Or sometimes if it really is important, maybe it's not for me to do anything about. Sometimes the lack of guidance means hang tight, just let go. And it's not for you to do something about. So lack of specific guidance is guidance to me. It means that it's not for me to figure out right now. It means it's not for me to do something about right now. Maybe it's not something I'm supposed to fix, or maybe I need to sit in the discomfort a little bit longer to get clearer about what I'm uncomfortable about, instead of having God fix it right away for me. Maybe there's something more I need to learn about that. So I see lack of an intuitive thought as guidance. But in order to do that, I really do have to pray on a constant basis, that to accept that I am not always going to get my way. I'm not in charge. I'm not in charge. I'm not in charge. And I hate that. But I have found it to be very true. And I have also found peace by not being in charge anymore. I'm at peace. Bad things will still happen. Good things will still happen. I'm just not in charge of it. I hope that helped.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Linda. There is one more question that I didn't have time to make the slide because it just came in.
Yep.
The question is, someone made a comment first. They said, I am having issues staying abstinent. Can you explain how the steps help you with abstinence?
The big book and the study guide would address this by saying, you work the steps. That's how you get abstinent. You work the steps and you become abstinent, and the problem is lifted from you, from your spiritual awakening. And as long as you keep doing 10, 11, and 12, you'll be able to remain abstinent. That was not my story. I have been in and out of relapse a long time in this program. And And so I had to do, I had to really, and I don't suggest you take, 25 years to do this. I had to really understand my disease at a step 1 level in a very meaningful way for me. It wasn't, and it's just, I'm just an obstinate person, I guess. I needed to know why. I needed to know why I had this disease. What is this disease? How does it work for me? And why can't I just put the flippin' fork down? And it felt too airy-fairy. It was too, I couldn't grab onto abstinence that way, because first of all, I was defining abstinence as following a food plan and, perfectly following this food plan. And that didn't work for me. I am not saying this is the right way. All I can say is this is what worked for me. How about if I say that? That's a safer way to put it. That's what the science of step 1 is all about. Okay, that the workshop that we're doing starting in January. It was my way of really accepting my physical allergy and my mental obsession. The science explains the physical allergy really, really well, and it also explains the mental obsession really, really well. And once I understood that, then I was able to apply the steps in a really meaningful way. But I guess I needed the remedial class. I couldn't take it. I'm a rebellious addict. I mean, I couldn't take your word for it. I couldn't take programs' word for it that I had this disease. I needed to understand it. I needed to know what was going on in my body that made this impossible, because like all of you, I show incredible amounts of willpower in other areas of my life. I have accomplished incredible things in my life, but this one freaking area, I could not do anything. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how much money I spent on it, no matter how much surgery I had, no matter whatever, I could not stay abstinent. I could not be in recovery. And it was only until I understood step 1 completely for me was I able to actually apply the rest of the steps. I had so much freaking shame about this addiction, so much shame about this disease. Why couldn't I do this? And I kept thinking something was wrong with me. And it just turns out that's the way my body and brain are made. It has nothing to do with me. And once I got that, I really enjoyed working the steps. I didn't endure working them. I enjoyed it. And the growth and the development has been wonderful. So that's my answer to that. And it's not the standard line. So if anybody else has a better big book answer to that, please feel free to chime in.
Thank you. There is an app for step 10 and 11. It's called it's at myspiritualtoolkit.com. You can use it on both types of phones, the Android type and the iPhones. And it also, what you do online also syncs with that. And it has a gratitude list. It's all free, except if you want the feature to send it to others. But there's, it's also there's a link to it on our Work the Steps portion. I think it's under step 11 there. So I just wanted you to all know that. And I look forward to working with those of you at the content committee at 1 p.m.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll close with the serenity prayer and then we'll stop recording.
Absolutely. Just one moment. Let me just get that
Okay.
on the screen for you.
All right, everybody, let's take a deep breath here and really, really get into it. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. See you next week.